A man cuts his hand. Not badly. Not enough to stop him working. Not enough to make anyone around him panic. If it happened today, he would probably rinse it under a tap, put on a bandage, and forget about it by next week. But this man isn't living today. He's living 10,000 years ago, and that changes everything. Because 10,000 years ago, a small cut could become something much larger. Not immediately. The danger came later. Hours later. Days later, sometimes weeks later, a wound that looked harmless could become infected. A fever could follow. The body could begin losing a fight nobody even knew was happening. Which raises a strange question. How did ancient humans survive before modern medicine? Because when we imagine the past, it's easy to assume people were constantly dying from things we barely think about today. A cut, a broken bone, a bad tooth, a difficult birth, an infection. Without hospitals, antibiotics, or surgery, it seems almost impossible that humans survived long enough to build civilizations at all. But they did. Not for a few centuries, for hundreds of thousands of years. Long before the first doctor, long before the first hospital, long before anyone understood what bacteria even were. So what was keeping them alive? The answer begins with something modern medicine has accidentally hidden from us. Your body is already a medical system. Miraculous if we could watch them directly. They identify threats, repair damage, destroy invaders, remove infected tissue, remember previous infections, and coordinate responses across the entire body. Most people think survival depends on medicine. But for almost all of human history, survival depended on biology. Ancient humans didn't have antibiotics. They had immune systems, and those immune systems were the product of millions of years of evolutionary warfare. Long before humans existed, life on Earth was already fighting microscopic battles, bacteria against bacteria, parasites against hosts, viruses against everything. Evolution didn't create perfect defenses, but it created defenses good enough to survive, good enough to adapt, good enough to keep the species moving forward. Yet even that wasn't enough to explain humanity's success, because the immune system can fight infection. It cannot hunt food. It cannot carry an injured person. It cannot protect someone with a broken leg. And that's where one of the biggest myths about ancient humans begins to fall apart. Most people imagine prehistoric survival as an individual achievement, a lone hunter surviving against impossible odds, a solitary figure battling nature. But researchers studying ancient skeletons discovered something unexpected. Some individuals survived injuries that should have killed them, severely damaged limbs, crippling disabilities, conditions that would have made hunting nearly impossible. Yet these people lived for years afterward. In some cases, decades. There was only one explanation. Someone helped them. Someone brought them food. Someone protected them. Someone kept them alive. The deeper archaeologists looked, the clearer the picture became. Human survival wasn't built on independence. It was built on cooperation, and that may have been one of humanity's greatest advantages. A wounded deer becomes vulnerable. A wounded wolf struggles to keep up. A wounded human could rely on an entire group. Long before hospitals existed, humans had already developed something equally powerful. Care. It's easy to overlook because it feels ordinary. But from an evolutionary perspective, it was extraordinary. Groups that supported one another survived better than groups that didn't. Compassion wasn't just a moral trait, it was a survival strategy. And in many ways, it still is. But even communities had limits, because there was one enemy nobody could see, one threat that followed humans everywhere: disease. Today, when people think about ancient life, they often imagine diseases spreading constantly through entire populations. That seems reasonable. After all, people had no medicine, no vaccines, no understanding of germs. But researchers discovered something surprising. For much of human history, humans may have experienced fewer large-scale disease outbreaks than many people assume, and the reason has nothing to do with medicine. It has to do with population size. Most ancient humans lived in relatively small groups, a few dozen people, maybe a few hundred, not millions, not even thousands. Many infectious diseases depend on large populations. They spread from person to person, constantly searching for new hosts. Without enough hosts, the disease simply dies out. This means some of humanity's deadliest epidemics may not have been possible until humans began building permanent settlements, which leads to an unexpected realization. Civilization didn't just solve problems, it created new ones. As humans settled into villages and cities, population density increased. People lived closer together. Waste accumulated. Water became contaminated, and diseases suddenly found the perfect environment to thrive. In many ways, civilization made humans less healthy before it eventually made them healthier. The very thing we associate with progress created entirely new dangers. And there was another problem: animals. Lots of animals. For most of human history, humans lived alongside wildlife. Then agriculture changed everything. People began raising livestock: cows, goats, pigs, chickens. Animals became part of everyday life. This provided food security, but it also created opportunities for diseases to jump between species. Researchers believe many major human diseases originated in animals before eventually adapting to humans. The closer people lived to animals, the more opportunities those diseases had. It's one of history's strangest trade-offs. The innovations that helped humans build civilization also exposed them to entirely new threats. Again and again, progress solved one problem while creating another, and nowhere was that balance more visible than childbirth. If you could travel back in time and observe ancient life, childbirth would probably be one of the most dangerous events you would witness. Modern medicine has transformed childbirth so dramatically that it's easy to forget how risky it once was. Human babies are unusual. Compared to other animals, their heads are enormous. At the same time, humans walk upright, which places limits on pelvic structure. These two realities create a difficult compromise. Giving birth is far more complicated for humans than for many other mammals. A difficult labor could become deadly. An infection could become deadly. Severe bleeding could become deadly. Yet generation after generation survived, not because childbirth was safe, because enough mothers survived, enough infants survived, enough families endured. Human history is often told as a story of great victories, but survival is usually much quieter than that. It's not perfection, it's persistence, and perhaps nowhere is that more obvious than in the way ancient humans approached medicine itself. Because despite popular belief, they weren't completely helpless. Ancient people spent thousands of years observing the natural world. They paid attention. They noticed patterns. Certain plants seemed to reduce pain. Others seemed to calm stomach problems. Some appeared to help wounds heal. Nobody understood chemistry. Nobody understood microbes. But observation doesn't require scientific terminology. It only requires memory. Knowledge accumulated generation after generation. Parents taught children. Elders shared experience. Communities preserved what seemed useful. Sometimes they were wrong, completely wrong, but occasionally they stumbled onto something remarkable. Take honey. For thousands of years, different cultures used honey on wounds. At first glance, that sounds primitive. Then modern researchers began studying it. What they found was unexpected. Honey naturally inhibits the growth of certain bacteria. In some situations, it genuinely helps. The people using honey thousands of years ago had no idea why, but they noticed results, and that was enough. The same pattern appears throughout history. Long before science could explain many treatments, humans were conducting experiments without realizing it. Every remedy was a test. Every generation inherited the results. Some ideas survived because they worked. Others survived because people believed they worked. Distinguishing between the two would take thousands of years, but the process had already begun. Slowly, patiently, across countless generations. And perhaps that's what makes ancient survival so fascinating. It wasn't a story about conquering nature. It was a story about adapting to it. Humans didn't possess special protection from disease. They weren't invincible. They weren't magically tougher. They simply developed enough advantages to keep going. An immune system refined over millions of years, communities willing to care for one another, knowledge passed from generation to generation, the ability to adapt faster than the challenges around them. None of these guarantees survival. Together, they made survival possible. And when you step back far enough, another realization begins to emerge. Every person alive today is the descendant of survivors. Not one survivor, thousands of them. People who survived infections without antibiotics, winters without heating, injuries without surgery, childbirth without hospitals. A world where uncertainty was part of daily life. For hundreds of thousands of years, that chain remained unbroken, one generation after another. one life after another, one narrow escape after another, until eventually it reached you. Modern medicine is one of humanity's greatest achievements. There is no question about that. It has saved countless lives and prevented unimaginable suffering. But perhaps the most remarkable part of the story is what came before it. Because for almost all of human history, there was no safety net, no emergency number to call, no pharmacy around the corner, no guarantee that help was coming. There was only the body, the community, the knowledge people carried with them, and the determination to see another sunrise. When we look back at ancient humans, it's tempting to focus on how much they lacked, but maybe the more interesting question is how much they accomplished despite those limitations. Because against odds that seem almost impossible from a modern perspective, they survived. And if they hadn't, none of us would be here to wonder how they did it.